So as I said, my name is Andrew Soren. I tend to split my time between Canada, between Uruguay and the United States. I call Toronto home these days, but I am so happy to be here in Melbourne. It is an extraordinary place. I'm the founder of a company that is called Eudaimonic by Design. It is an extraordinary network of practitioners of positive psychology who go into organizations and redesign systems to create the potential for people to have more engagement, more ethics, more excellence in their daily lives. But I am also a graduate of the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program at University of Pennsylvania. I have been part of that faculty for, yes, the last 7 years. And I am the vice president of the MAP Alumni Association at UPenn, and there are so many Mapsters in this audience from around the world. If you are a Mapster, can you please raise some noise and stand up? On behalf of all of my MAP brothers and sisters who truly are an extraordinary family around the globe, I have to say it is an extraordinary and exciting thing to be welcoming a practitioner up on the stage in the opening ceremony of this World Congress. It is, I believe, another first for the World Congress to have an academic and a practitioner sharing the stage at the same time. It reflects the unique and extraordinary thing about positive psychology, both as a field and as a practice, that we are able to combine research and application, and it's something that's truly unique and extraordinary. It is fitting that our next speaker follows after Marty. Marty's 2011 best-selling book, Flourish, set out a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal for researchers and practitioners of positive psychology. In it, he said that by 2051, we should have 51% of the population of the world flourishing. Well, it's possibly difficult to describe our next speaker, Steve Leventhal's life work as being anything but that. As he himself declares, his purpose is to empower underserved adolescent youth, particularly girls and young women, to unleash their inner potential, transform their circumstances, and enable themselves to thrive in the face of pervasive adversity and conflict. Steve has been the executive director of CorStone since 2008. Under his leadership, CorStone, a global nonprofit that tries to change the world from the inside out, has pioneered evidence-based resilience programs that have reached more than 50,000 youth and women living in poverty in India, in Kenya, and in the United States. These programs aim to help the most marginalized and economically disadvantaged populations find their strengths, advocate for their rights, and become agents of positive social change. Steve's ambition is nothing less than large-scale social transformation. Today we'll hear him talk about his experiences in Bihar, India, a high-poverty state with a population of more than 100 million people. There, CorStone has been working with the government of Bihar to scale resilience programs that are called Youth First and Girls First in middle schools throughout the state, with the hopes of eventually touching 2.5 million children a year. Stephen is absolutely an inspiration to all of us who hope to make Marty's BHAG a reality. Please join me in a very warm welcome, Stephen Leventhal.
Good evening, everybody. According to Marty, about 50% of you are waiting to run out and eat. The other 50% are jet lagged. I'm both, so I thank you for staying here for my talk. So it's a pleasure to be here together with all of you this evening. Where are my slides? They don't seem to be showing. Thank you. And to help to kick off this 6th World Congress on Positive Psychology. Similar to what John Higgins spoke about, I'd like to begin by talking about the power of thought. Thoughts are powerful. Even a single thought can generate a change that starts deep inside us and grows into an unstoppable, mobilizing force that in turn can transform everyone around us. Every one of us in this room has that power, the power to transform not only our internal landscape, but to start a ripple effect that changes our world. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. This is Neetu. Neetu lives in Bihar, India, which is one of India's poorest states. It's a population of 100 million people. It's a state where girls and women in particular don't fare very well. It's up in the upper northeast of India near the border of Nepal. Neetu was 14 years old and in 8th grade when she attended our Girls First Resilience Training Program, which is an evidence-based, school-based program that seeks to empower marginalized adolescent girls to deal with severe challenges that they face on a daily basis. Challenges like gender, caste, and religious discrimination, trafficking, lack of access to education and health care, and forced early marriage. Shortly after Neetu completed the Girls First program, her father forcibly married her to an older man. As is common in Bihar, Neetu lived with the man and his parents, and they abused her severely, beating her and burning her with cigarettes and hot milk on her hands and her neck and her body. Later, Neetu told us, sometimes I felt like I should commit suicide. But then I would always remember that I'm special, that I'm worthy, and I have so many character strengths, like persistence and bravery. She held on to that thought and that one day she would escape and that she would be okay. Thoughts are powerful. And at the age of 16, fueled by the belief, the single thought that she was worth more than the circumstances that she found herself in, and armed with her awareness of her character strengths, Neetu escaped. She went back to her parents' house, and she told them everything. Her father's response was to try and force her to return, but she forcefully pushed back, telling him that she would file a complaint with the police and that she intended to complete her education. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. Her father continued to pressure her to return to her husband, and he beat her as she refused to do so. And he forbade her to leave the house. In addition to what she faced at home, Neetu was vilified and ostracized by the local village community. Still, one day, she found a way out of the house and she took the admission exam for high school, 9th grade, something that is highly unusual for girls in her village, but particularly a girl that had been married, and she began to go to school and did not heed her father's warnings. But even then, her father wouldn't let up. He tore up her books and her papers. He continued to abuse and beat her. And one day at the age 16, now in 10th grade, her father beat her so badly that she was forced to quit school. Somehow, Neetu says, she held on to her self-worth. She continued to believe that one day she would get out of the situation. She continued to think about how 2 years earlier in the Girls First program, she had learned to problem solve, stand up for her rights, and use her character strengths to reach her goals. I'm having problems with our mouse here, I'm sorry. Okay. And then, a wonderful and unusual thing happened. A young man from her village whom she knew approached Neetu for marriage. Unusual, because normally a marriage is arranged in Neetu's village, and remarriage in particular is taboo. At first, Neetu refused him, telling him about her past. But that young man, like Neetu, was determined to break the mold. He assured her that he did not want to bring the past into the present, and that they both deserved a fresh chance at life. And so Nitu made a bold decision. Now, nearly 20 years old, she agreed to marry him. Her father refused to give permission, but Nitu's words, "I wanted to start a new life, and I was willing to face all the odds." She remarried, and she currently lives happily with her husband and a daughter. But the story still does not end there. Today, at the age of 21 years, 7 years after attending our Girls First program, Nitu is preparing yet again for her 10th grade exam. This time, her husband strongly supports her desire for education, and together they are committed to ensuring that their daughter one day receives the education that she deserves and has every opportunity for a thriving life. Through the power of a thought, Nitu, knowingly or not, became a change agent, transforming not only the trajectory of her life, but that of her child, her husband, and quite possibly her community as she continues to stand up for what she believes and to live her life in the way that she feels is right. That same power, that power to catalyze change, lives inside of every one of us. Nearly 20 years ago, I had a thought. A single thought that birthed inside me and came to change the trajectory of my life and my work in the world. I believe that life for most of us is an interplay between love and fear. I believe that love lies buried deep within our essence, and that in most, if not all instances of life, if we work to uncover and address our fears, we will find love underneath, waiting to greet us. So one day I had this thought. In this dance of love and fear, in which fear seems too often to get the upper hand, what would it take to move the world even just 1 inch from fear to love? In 2001, I began working in the international development sector to find out. And what I found was that despite so much fantastic, heroic work being done in challenging, low-income countries all over the world, my single thought actually pointed to a glaring missing piece. The need for investment in an individual mental and social well-being as a means to catalyze large-scale change. Even as billions of dollars poured into and today continue to pour into healthcare, infrastructure, and basic education in low and middle income countries, investment in mental emotional well-being was and continues to be largely ignored. Now, if you're a girl and you're poor and you're low caste in India, this is, as a slum dweller friend of mine said to me many years ago, a life without life. Literally scripted into your emotional DNA is the message that your life is worth nothing. When your fundamental sense of self, your self-identity, is brought into question from birth based on your caste, your gender, and multi-generational institutionalized poverty, efforts aimed at increasing access to education and health services, as many in the development sector do, are critical to making change, but it's not enough. And so I began to ask myself, what if we were to consciously, purposely educate even just 1% of the next generation in evidence-based practices that fostered strengths like loving kindness, compassion, forgiveness, courage, persistence. What catalyzing effect might such a shift have in particular on highly vulnerable, marginalized youth in poverty or low-income settings and the cultures and communities in which they lived? And so I came to believe and was convinced that what was missing and sorely needed was mental and social well-being interventions that could not only uncover individual inner power, but also lead to a chain reaction of positive societal change. Because here's the thing. Helping individuals to increase their well-being doesn't happen in a vacuum. If we want to move the needle, if we want to change the status quo, we need to recognize that fostering individual well-being is intrinsically tied to advances that we hope to make in education, in health, in girl and women empowerment, and ultimately to the reduction of poverty and the birth of thriving communities. This is true in any community worldwide, in the highest income country settings and in the lowest, and in all settings in between. It's true in my community, and it's true in yours, wherever that may be. At CorStone, we like to call this working from the inside out. And the good news is that our research in India and Kenya has shown this approach works. In study after study after study that we've conducted over the last 10 years and continuing now into the present, in densely crowded urban slums and remote rural villages, in community-based programs and school-based programs, we have consistently found that youth who receive our resilience training not only show improvements on a multitude of mental health indicators like emotional resilience and self-efficacy, but they're also more likely to employ skills and strategies that they've learned to improve their reproductive and sexual health, their nutrition, their sanitation, and even access to safe water. Gender attitudes change. They're more likely to delay early marriage. They're more able to advocate for their education. School attendance improves, school engagement improves, classroom behavior improves, relationships between students and their peers and their teachers improve. And importantly, they're likely to bring the skills they've learned back to their home, sharing with parents and siblings and even others in their village, in turn creating a multiplier effect and eventually large-scale transformation. So, what's the secret sauce? Many people think there's something mysterious or magical about how we're getting thousands of marginalized children in the midst of tremendous hardship to do what they're doing, to stand up for their rights, to think big and set goals and make plans and strategies to achieve them. But really, as you all know, and we know, it's not magic. This work rests on universal truths and the oldest teachings. Truths like the power of loving kindness, of compassion in action, of acts of forgiveness and gratitude. Cultural norms and traditions can and frequently do result in the covering up of what we already know deep inside ourselves. Centuries of inequality, shame, low social standing, gender and caste inequities, of navigating cultural and social norms dictating what we should and should not do, all of that causes us to forget. To forget the power of the universal truth that inside every person are the seeds of thriving, flourishing, and self-actualization. The power of a single thought to transform ourselves and the world around us for the better. And so, the concepts that we teach in our programs are not new, and I would imagine this to be the case in many of your programs as well. What is still relatively new, thanks in large part to the field of positive psychology, is the availability of evidence-based tools to access and bring forth our truths, our strengths, our virtues, and our values, and importantly, the data to show us the outcomes. Just imagine what might happen when we give millions of marginalized kids, many of whom are the first ever in their family to attend school, the tools to see within, to access their inner light, the tools to choose who and what they want to become and how they want to live within their societies and cultures. Boys and girls, armed with a newfound sense of equality, common humanity, a practice of kindness, and the skills to problem solve. My personal hope is that we might just be starting to move the world that 1 inch from fear towards love. So what's next? In regards to CorStone, in Bihar, we're working now hand in hand with the Ministry of Education to scale our Youth First program, which is a resilience program for both boys and girls, to thousands of government schools. This year and next, we're undertaking what we call a demonstration model of scale-up in approximately 1,400 schools, in which we are testing and refining our training and monitoring systems to be certain it can work and that it can be sustained with the government at large scale, given their limited resources. In addition, we are continuing to expand to additional states across India, and rollout of our Youth First program also continues in Kenya, in nomadic Maasai areas, rural agricultural areas, and urban slum populations. And we have plans underway for expansion to at least 2 more low-income countries in Southeast Asia and Africa by 2021. As you attend this conference in the next few days, I'd like to ask you to remember this. What we are talking about here together is more right than our societies and our media would have us believe. And Marty cited some similar statistics. The world is changing at an unprecedented pace. For most of history, more than 90% of the world's population lived in extreme poverty, and today that number is less than 10%. By 2030, that number could be close to 0. Nearly 90% of the world's population now has access to electricity. In the last 20 years, 120 million new first-time learners entered school. And while there's still another 260 million children or so not attending school, and that is not an insignificant number, the good news is that number is dropping. This is quite simply an extraordinary shift in the history of the world. Poverty reduction of this magnitude at this pace is unparalleled. Never before have so many people been lifted out of extreme poverty over such a brief period. We are on the verge of creating a world where millions of people can, for the first time in history, focus on flourishing rather than simply alleviation of suffering. So how do we address the serious challenges that remain, particularly the game changer of climate change? And make no mistake, climate change is a game changer, as well as related challenges such as refugee resettlement, gender inequity, and increasing economic and financial disparity. Now, I'm certain that if history is any guide, we will look to politicians and experts and technology and big data to generate external solutions to those problems. And we are already doing that. But I encourage you all to think of how we can approach and address these challenges in another way, to see them as internal problems that can be addressed when we recognize our own individual worth, claim our internal power, and challenge our attitudes, values, beliefs, thoughts, and behaviors. In changing ourselves, we can change our communities and we can change our world. And if it's true that we are drawn by the future and not simply driven by the past, then I'm confident that with the power that is in this room, we can help the next generation to do just that. So let me pause for a second to say thank you to so many of you who have helped create the field of positive psychology and led the development of scientific studies on character strengths, on love, on hope, kindness, compassion, self-compassion, forgiveness. I'm grateful to all of you for that. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'd like to close with a challenge. With some notable exceptions, several of which I'm happy to see are represented in this room. Positive psychology and positive education still remains primarily in the domain of high-income countries and settings. These concepts are just beginning to make their way into the health and education systems of low and middle-income countries, and only rarely at large scale. It's no longer enough to consider, much less prioritize, what we want our children to become. We need to help them focus on who they want to become. The science of positive psychology has a key role to play. Evidence-based, school-based, and community-based well-being programs that focus on fostering loving kindness, compassion, forgiveness in youth are key. Bringing these skills to low and middle-income countries is key. Character strengths, emotional competence, assertive nonviolent communication skills, leadership skills, values-based group problem solving, and conflict resolution skills. These all will be foundational to the next generation's ability to navigate the massive global-wide challenges that they will face. And so, I'd like to challenge each and every one of you to take what you do and commit to using your strengths in new and novel ways. With grace and with purpose, finding new avenues to doing what you do. I challenge you to bring it forth, to bring the science of love and well-being forth to unexpected places, to unexpected populations, to unexpected venues. Apply it to challenges that you think you can't tackle or address, the things that commonly come outside of the realm of positive psychology, like climate change and poverty reduction, or prejudice, or inequality. You don't know where it will lead. And if there's one thing I've learned in 20 years of international development in some pretty difficult settings, you really don't need to know. Like the parable of the droplet of rain that becomes a puddle, that becomes a stream, that becomes a river, and finally an ocean, all you need to know is that you are doing your best to bring it forth. Give it to the next generation. All of us, practitioners, academics, policymakers, and funders, are accountable to the next generation. And that is a shared accountability, and the next generation, our youth, urgently need us to come together in shared purpose. Be a voice that galvanizes other voices into action. Help others to choose love over fear. With the power and conviction of a single thought, Become a change agent. Start from within. And then build an army of lovers, an army of peaceful warriors, an army of compassion. Our kids and our planet need nothing less from all of us. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for your kind attention this evening, and I wish you a wonderful, joyful, and fulfilling conference. Thank you.